Mel invited my wife's ex-boyfriend to every family gathering to prove he was better. My wife cut contact after I finally exposed her plan. I, 31M, live a pretty standard life, working in a straightforward office environment. I'm not particularly flashy, just someone who values peace and privacy over big social drama. When I first met my wife, I was drawn to her calm demeanor. We clicked almost immediately because neither of us craved constant attention or conflict. We had a humble wedding with our closest relatives, which felt perfect for two people who believed in living simply. From the start, though, her mother was a different story. She was loud, opinionated, and seemed to thrive on stirring controversy. At first, I tried to be understanding. She was my wife's parent, after all, and I grew up believing family ties should be honored. But it didn't take long for me to notice a pattern that made me uneasy. Every time there was a family gathering, be it a birthday, holiday, or even a casual backyard barbecue, her mother insisted on inviting my wife's ex-boyfriend. It puzzled me. Why would anyone want an ex hovering around all the time? Early on, I assumed maybe it was a friendly, inclusive gesture. My wife's ex came from the same neighborhood, and they had dated briefly before we got together. My wife admitted that her mother always liked him, but she dismissed it as simple nostalgia. For a little while, I bought that explanation. Still, it felt odd to have him show up at Christmas, share jokes at family dinners, and act like he was part of the inner circle. My wife swore there was nothing to worry about. He's just a guest, she'd say, lightly brushing off my concerns. Things started escalating at a 4th of July cookout. Her mother made an offhand remark in front of everyone about how my daughter's ex is so successful. He travels abroad all the time for important conferences. She gave me a pointed look, as if to say, "Why aren't you doing something equally impressive?" I try not to let it get to me. But the subtle insinuations kept piling up. There was a moment when I overheard her telling a cousin, "I still think my daughter was happiest back then. Applying her time with the ex was somehow better." I pulled my wife aside later and asked if she found her mother's behavior strange. She looked uncomfortable. "Look, I know it's weird," she confessed, "but arguing with my mother is like talking to a wall. She'll bring the ex around no matter what I say. I'd rather ignore it than start a fight we can't finish." Sensing her distress, I tried to let it go, but it kept gnawing at me. Why was her mother so determined to prove the ex was better? What was she hoping to achieve? At one family gathering, the ex showed up and started bragging about his latest vacation. Meanwhile, her mother kept steering the conversation to his accomplishments, praising him in front of everybody. One of my relatives, who'd been invited that day, pulled me aside and asked, "Isn't that your wife's ex? Why is he being celebrated like this?" I had no real answer. It was embarrassing, but more than that, it felt like a direct challenge to my place in the family. The deeper frustration came from the fact that my wife and I genuinely loved each other. We rarely argued, and we tried to keep negativity out of our relationship. Yet, her mother's constant meddling was injecting a tension we never wanted. I began to suspect it was more than mere nostalgia or misguided kindness. Her mother might actually be trying to set my wife back up with her ex. It seemed too outrageous to be true, but each new gathering strengthened that suspicion. Things took an even more uncomfortable turn around Thanksgiving. We planned a modest celebration at her parents' home. The moment we arrived, I saw the ex's car parked out front. I exchanged a glance with my wife, and she just gave a resigned shrug. Inside, her mother wasted no time comparing my job to the ex's. She actually said to me, right in the living room, "You know, he's doing so well. Maybe you could learn a thing or two from him. It wouldn't hurt to aim a little higher." Several relatives glanced at me awkwardly, clearly sensing the dig. I tried to keep my cool, but my temper was boiling beneath the surface. Later that evening, I went to the kitchen to grab a drink and overheard her mother whispering to the ex about an upcoming family vacation. She was rattling off dates and asking if he'd be free to come along. I stood there, hidden behind a door, hearing every word. I couldn't believe it. She was trying to plan a getaway for the entire family, including my wife's ex, without even running it by us. It dawned on me that she was carefully orchestrating events to push them closer together. Before I re-entered the room, I pulled out my phone and quickly recorded a snippet of their conversation. I'm not proud of snooping, but I felt like I needed proof if I was ever going to confront her mother. My wife and I left early that night. In the car, I told her everything I'd overheard. She was shocked but not entirely surprised. She's always held a torch for the guy, my wife admitted. He's from the same neighborhood, my mother adores his family, and I guess she thinks we made a mistake breaking up. But that was years ago. It's insane that she can't let it go. There was a defeated look on her face that really bothered me. I realized I wasn't the only one under siege here. My wife felt just as disrespected, maybe more. I decided we needed to set boundaries. My wife agreed, so she called her mother the next day and tried to address the issue calmly. She confronted her about the ex and how uncomfortable it made us. Her mother's reaction was defensive and manipulative. She insisted he's practically family. I won't apologize for inviting him. If you had any sense, you'd thank me for keeping your options open. My wife was floored. She tried to argue, but her mother slammed the phone down. Around that time, the ex himself started sending my wife friendly texts, out of the blue. He'd say things like, "We should catch up soon," or "Your mother said I might see you at the next get-together." It felt as though her mother had encouraged him to reach out. My wife ignored him, but he didn't seem to get the hint. I began to wonder if there was a bigger plan in motion, something that went beyond casual family gatherings. The tension reached a peak when we were invited to a cousin's wedding on my wife's side. We heard through the grapevine that her mother personally insisted the ex attend. When we arrived, he was not only there, but he was seated at the same table as us. Her mother hovered nearby, making suggestive remarks like, "Don't they look good together? They have so many memories." People around us whispered in confusion, clearly baffled by her bizarre fixation. My wife looked mortified. I fought the urge to cause a scene right then and there. I realized that ignoring her mother was no longer an option. She was crossing lines in ways that felt almost vindictive. It wasn't merely that she liked the ex. She was actively trying to undermine our marriage. On top of that, she seemed proud of it. At that wedding, I quietly made a decision. I was going to confront her mother head-on, and if it came to it, we'd cut her out of our lives until she respected our boundaries. I started by gathering evidence. I know it sounds extreme, but her mother's manipulations were causing real harm. I saved text messages from her mother urging my wife to look at who you could have been with instead of settling. I had that voice recording from Thanksgiving. I noted down the times the ex was deliberately invited to gatherings under false pretenses. My reasoning was simple. If I confronted her mother without proof, she'd spin the story to make me look paranoid. She was a master at twisting conversations, as I'd witnessed multiple times. Then came a family reunion that her mother organized at a local community hall. This was supposed to be a friendly get-together with distant relatives. Naturally, we suspected the ex would be there, so my wife and I prepared ourselves emotionally. When we arrived, her mother greeted us with a forced smile, then immediately started praising the ex's latest accomplishments within earshot. My wife tried to walk away, but her mother made a point of calling the ex over. "Look who finally arrived," she announced to everyone. "Don't you miss the good old days?" The ex chuckled, acting sheepish. It was beyond awkward. I felt my blood pressure spike, but I held my tongue for the moment. Midway through the reunion, I saw my chance. Her mother was sitting with a few relatives, gossiping. I approached, and my wife stood beside me. Quietly but firmly, I began, "We need to talk about your constant involvement of the ex in our lives." She gave me a condescending smile. "Oh, don't be dramatic. He's just a friend of the family." That's when I calmly took out my phone. I played the short clip from Thanksgiving, where she was inviting him on a family vacation behind our backs, explicitly stating she wanted them to spend more time together. The look on her face shifted from smug to furious in seconds. She tried to grab my phone, demanding I stop embarrassing her in front of everyone. I pulled back. "You've embarrassed us repeatedly," I said, my voice louder now, drawing attention from others. "You keep forcing my wife's ex into gatherings to prove he's better than me. You encourage him to reach out to her. You make sly comments, and you refuse to respect our relationship." Her mother sputtered, accusing me of being controlling, but that didn't hold water. A few relatives looked shocked, and a couple nodded like they finally understood the tension in the air. She then switched tactics, claiming it was all in my wife's best interest. "Your marriage is a joke," she hissed. "I'm trying to ensure she doesn't miss out on something truly special." I stared at her, speechless at the audacity. My wife snapped at that point, telling her mother that if she couldn't accept us as a married couple, then maybe we shouldn't be part of her life. There was a moment of stunned silence in that hall. A few onlookers whispered, but no one rushed to defend her mother. Her mother glared, then demanded that we leave. She accused me of driving a wedge in the family, threatened to ruin my reputation among her relatives. I laughed internally at her threats. She had no real leverage beyond gossip. But I also knew how manipulative she could be, so I made one final statement before we walked out. If you try to sabotage us again, you won't hear from us. This ends now. We stormed out, my heart pounding, a swirl of anger and relief mixing together. I was proud of my wife for standing up for our marriage, but I knew the fallout would be colossal. Little did I realize how quickly that fallout would come crashing down. A few days after the reunion, the phone call started. Her mother bombarded my wife's phone, leaving voicemails in which she swore we'd regret crossing her. She claimed she had plenty of reasons to convince the extended family that I was toxic. My wife listened to only a snippet before deleting them in disgust. It felt like we were in a bad soap opera. Meanwhile, the ex also texted, saying he felt caught in the middle and insisting he never wanted to break up a marriage. We ignored him. Clearly, her mother had been pulling the strings, possibly with him as a willing participant. Not long after, I decided to consult a lawyer about a possible restraining order if her mother's harassment escalated. I'd read up on how repeated unwelcome contact, attempts at intimidation, and slander can be grounds for legal action if it crosses a certain line. My lawyer agreed that we had a case if she continued harassing us, given the voicemails and texts. We kept that option as a last resort, hoping it wouldn't come to that. Word spread through the family grapevine that we were done playing along with her mother's schemes. Several relatives reached out, offering support, saying they'd had run-ins with her manipulative behavior too. Others criticized us, claiming we should make peace. My wife and I stood firm. We made it clear we wouldn't attend any more events hosted by her mother if she continued to invite the ex or disrespect our marriage. That ultimatum, in effect, put a strain on the entire extended family dynamic. Her mother tried another dirty trick. She orchestrated a birthday celebration for a distant cousin and secretly invited us and the ex again, hoping we'd walk into a surprise confrontation. Luckily, a sympathetic family member tipped us off in advance, so we never showed. We got frantic calls from her mother afterward, scolding us for being no-shows. "You're tearing this family apart," she accused, as though her own meddling hadn't been the real catalyst. We simply hung up. Finally, the breaking point came when my wife told her mother we planned to start a new holiday tradition. We'd celebrate on our own or with my side of the family. We weren't interested in walking into another gathering with the ex lurking around every corner. Her mother exploded. She tried scaring us, saying she'd talk to a lawyer to force us to respect her. That threat made no sense legally, so we called her bluff. At that point, it was clear she had lost all control over us, and that realization must have enraged her. We sent her a formal letter, drafted with our lawyer's guidance, stating that any further harassment or attempts to undermine our marriage would result in legal action. It was blunt, but it cut to the core of the matter. From that day forward, we've cut contact. She no longer has access to our personal events, and we refuse to attend hers. According to relatives who still speak to her, she's furious about being shut out, constantly complaining that we stole her daughter and ruined her grand plan to see the ex back in the picture. Apparently, she never even tried to hide her scheme once we left. She boasted about how she almost succeeded in reuniting them. In the end, our revenge, if you want to call it that, was stripping away her influence and letting her face the fallout of her actions. No more illusions, no more sneaky invites. We simply removed ourselves from her grasp, forcing her to confront the reality that her meddling destroyed the relationship we might have had with her. Some might see it as harsh, but my wife and I view it as self-preservation. We have enough peace now to focus on each other, no longer dreading the next family gathering or backhanded remark. That's the story of how we finally exposed our plan and cut ties. It hurt at first because cutting off a parent is never easy, but we chose to prioritize our relationship and our well-being. In doing so, we learned that drawing a hard boundary can be the ultimate form of standing up for ourselves. If someone can't respect our marriage, they don't get to be part of it. It's as simple as that.